Hello and welcome to this topic and overview of cloud security. This can be summarized really in role-based access control. That's what's implemented here, role-based access control. And the recommendation is you get a rich reference implementation that maximizes the different roles to a specific, different users to a specific role. And if you want an easy life, that's what you use. You use this predefined reference roles rather than creating your own. So in the role-based access control, you've got this simple expression: who can do what on which set of data. So the who is the user. So that's whether you're a tax accountant, a tax auditor, in terms of a transaction processor, that's who, the person. The what, this is driven by our functional security. That is a whole hierarchy of either job roles, abstract roles, and various privileges, linking us to, in terms of the UI and the flow through the workflow about what we can do. So we've got some examples there of what can I enter and post journals, can I view a payslip, can I run reports. So I'd have to have the privilege. That gives me right down to the resources, about the flow through the form, the actual buttons I can see is the privilege. And then we have a data set. So this is where your data security comes in. Which set of data? Am I restricted to a particular general ledger book, in this case UK ledger? As an employee, I can only see my pay slips, and as a accounting, I can only run reports on the behalf of a UK ledger. Who can do what on which set of data? So keep that in your mind and you won't go too far wrong with the security model. So here we've got a typical user, an end user, Linda Smith, and she's been attached 3 roles. So job role of HR specialist. Behind that, we've got duty roles, privileges, and her access to all the, in terms of database forms. The role as an employee, that's an abstract one, so it's not really related to a particular business flow or business process. And she's also a line manager. So the line manager perhaps gives her access to look at the employee dashboard, etc. And remember, it's a combination really. What you'll see is functions and data. So in the case of HR, Linda Smith would be restricted to see only her reports through the use of security profile. In the financial modules, it's normally ledger, business unit, asset book, or reference set to restrict what data we can see. So it's always, you have to think about the 2 elements, what we can do and on which set of data. So as in my introduction, we do get a predefined security. So there's jobs specifically for a particular process, such as configuring the tax engine, configuring the tax engine from a third party, or in terms of a service provider from a third party, such as Vertex or Taxware. Within those, there's a whole hierarchy of duty roles, and on top of that functional setup, you add the data element. What data, which book, which business unit, which reference set do I have access to? If you can use that, then it minimizes your security setup. If you can't use that because you've got very, very specific processes, then you do have the option to define or customize, create your own job roles, abstract roles, your own roll up in terms of hierarchies. So in terms of the reference, or even if you're doing it yourself, then the job role or an abstract role is key. So that's what you've been hired to do. The duty roles is a whole selection of privileges. So in terms of tax, can I get to the regime? Can I configure rules in the tax simulation? Can I do testing on a particular business unit or a particular legal entity? And you'll see below that, the duty roles is a resource. They don't show it on the slide, but the resources is hard coded by the developers, giving you access to the various UIs and the buttons in the UIs to give you the ability to do those hierarchy of tasks. Ever since version 10, we've got this one-stop shop now. Security Console is where you can do everything. So normally under the navigator, look for the Security Console. And since version 10, you could use it. Since version 12, it becomes mandatory. In terms of here, anything you want to do with modifying, looking at the security, setting up new users, if you're not using HCM and the onboarding process, is all driven by the security console. This is just an extract of the security console, and you can review the existing roles. You can set up new users if you wanted here. So in this practice, you're going to look at in terms of the roles, and with your existing user provided, you're going to give yourself a receivables manager, tax manager and supplier manager. You're also going to make sure in terms of the data access that for later exercises you've got access to the UK business model. Now let me just in terms of remember I talked earlier about the ability in docs.oracle.com, docs.oracle.com, one place stop to get all the documentation. You could either use application and help to get you to the same place. Here I've pulled in a notice down the bottom. So this is the very, very latest in terms of security reference. And notice we've got various 4 tax roles. So the tax manager, our starting point would be the tax manager, and you'll see here defines the tax policies and is efficient for all tax configuration. And this is targeted for a role that's setting up the regime and taxes. Now, if we look at the tax specialist job is to look at those variable entities. So my tax rates and tax jurisdictions, if they change frequently, that's what this design role is designed for. And we've got a specific one if I'm intending to bring or load data from a third party in the cloud for the US and Canada. Other countries are going to follow, but in terms of the current release, using a third party of Vertex O Cloud is restricted to US and Canada. And then you might give a user the tax administrator role to give you access to those in terms of, so give you access to specific tasks, i.e. duty roles, which will give you privilege and resources to pull in and load data from a third party, particularly say in terms of tax content setup, such as geographies, rates, etc. So first starting point is perhaps to have a look at those 4 roles and the difference. And on each of these, if you scroll down, it starts to list all the duties that's under those roles. And that might give you an opportunity if you're thinking about in terms of editing. If we move to the application, I've jumped a little bit ahead in that I've gone directly into the security console look. And what I've pulled up here is I've looked for these 2 roles, whether I'm a tax manager or a tax administrator look. And this is a very, very useful tool where you can compare. So what duty privileges do I get as a tax manager that I don't get as a tax administrator? And you'll see in effect, the green is obviously that role gives me those duties. The red denies them. So my tax administrator, most of the functional area of going to invoices, suppliers is restricted. I would have to have the job role of tax manager to be able to do that. Again, I'm filtering on everything, but I could filter it based on functional and data security, and also hierarchical roles that I've inherited from another subset role. If I look on here, you've also got this nice option where you can compare. Again, I'm not filtering it, so everything, what's in tax manager and not in the tax administrator. And then I could do the opposite of what's in the tax administrator's role and not in the tax manager's role. So in this role-based access, based on the roles that are attached to the user, that will limit you to who, normally the user, can do what on which set of data. So here, this is what's restricting you to what you can do. You'll have another set that we'll see in terms of practices, where we'll give a data set based on a business unit and reference set, and that will control what you can do. So if you want to have a look at the tax specialist on the environment, you could go ahead and do so. And if we look at the user, and I'm currently in terms of logged on as FOS 02 in terms of student. And if I search here, this will show us, once I zoom in to the hyperlink with this student, all the roles that are attached. And for my demo this morning, and it's the same as the practice, I've attached the accounts receivables role, and I've also attached down the bottom, you'll see tax manager role. So I've attached those to the user to give me sufficient access to do what. There's a further step where I'll have to configure the data set to tell the system which business unit, which reference set I will have access to. So that concludes this short overview of the security model. Remember that role-based access control and the expression who can do what on which set of data.